My mother is from Tamil Nadu, my father is from Bangalore, Karnataka, and he had joined the Indian Army, and because of that I grew up traveling all across India, being with many different cultures in India. So I feel very, in a way, very lucky and very privileged to have connected to many different cultures. In Appa's travels, when he was stationed in a place called Kirki, very close to Pune. That's where I was born, but I think I was there for about 6 months or so before they went on another travel. So in fact, I would say London is my most stablest where I have lived. Otherwise, when I was in India, it's with my parents, it was a year somewhere, sometimes even 6 months in a place. So yeah, traveled a lot.
Yeah, could you tell us about your way to dance? That's the most important question, I believe.
Yeah. So how did I get dancing? I guess traveling, in some ways you can say, is dance because you're always moving. But that apart, my mother is a musician and a dancer, and I think, like many women and young girls from the southern Indian culture who always learned dance and music. Amma grew up in Chennai, and she had trained both in Bharatanatyam and in Carnatic music as a young girl. So I grew up surrounded by culture, by music, by dance, and her interest as an artist, and also her interest to connect with local communities wherever we traveled, meant that I was always involved in some form of cultural activity. So whether it was during any kind of local celebration or festivals, whether it's Diwali or a Sikh celebration or Christmas, it didn't matter in terms of which faith or which community, but whatever celebration was around, Amma was always invited to perform, to sometimes get other people to perform. So I was surrounded by this, and I don't even remember when I actually started performing in a way, but I've always been performing, always doing creative work. And in terms of, and wherever we went, I did dance classes. So it was never Bharatanatyam classes as such. Sometimes it was Bharatanatyam, sometimes it was whatever was available, folk styles, and with my mother. And I don't, like mothers and daughters, I was not perhaps the best student for her, or she my best teacher in that way. There was never a formal learning, but I think because it was always surrounded by music and dance, that in some ways perhaps that was a better teaching, that it was always available. If Amma was rehearsing, I'll be sitting with her, listening to her, or she will say, call not Anusha, but I have a pet name, so she would call me and said, Kanna inge va, we've got to perform this tomorrow, come on, dance. So she will sing, I will dance, and she will make some suggestions, So yeah, I guess it was natural for me to be part of arts. And of course, I have to say, my father was hugely in love with dance and music. So, he encouraged Amma to continuously be very active in the arts. Giving thanks to all my teachers. So yes, my very first teacher was my mother, and different dance artists or community artists I met during my travel. But when I went to Kalakshetra, other than Rukmini Devi, who I didn't learn directly from, she would come every day to college during the prayer early in the morning. So we would have her darshan, as it were, her vision, be inspired by her. Sometimes she would talk about certain things. But there were whole hosts of teachers at Kalakshetra who I trained with, and they're all extremely well known. So Chinna Sharda teacher, who's a very well known tutor and guru, she was one of my main teachers. Thomas Anna, he was my first year's teacher. Janardhanan sir, Balagopalan sir, Pushpa Akka, I mean I can list all of them. So those were my teachers at Kalakshetra. Then I trained in Delhi with Leela Sampson. And then I continued my further training with C.V. Chandrasekhar sir. And over time, there are so many young dance artists who've trained in Kalakshetra, and I have gone and taken lessons with them. They are now extremely famous. So these artists are very well known now. Vijna and Ranjit and Vijna. Then Shyam and Viraja. So these are younger artists who I have sometimes gone and trained with. Braga Bessel, who's a very well-known dance artist teaching Abhinaya. And of course, over the years, I've done lots of workshops with lots of Bharatanatyam artists.
Okay, in Bharatanatyam, any favorite dances? Yeah,
Okay.
you must have.
Okay.
Of them, yeah.
Okay. Let me finish that one. So these are the artists I have had long training associations. Those are the names I have shared with you. But of course, there are so many who I have either done 1-day course or a 1-week course with. And these are only Bharatanatyam artists, but I've also been very influenced by artists who've had either a Kathakali or a Kudiyattam training, particularly Kudiyattam. Kapila Venu is a very inspiring artist for me. And I also had a time when I was also at different times learning Kalari Payathu, and influenced by Chandralekha's work. As an artist, she worked a lot with Kalari artists, and so that was also, as an artist, as a choreographer, she's had a lot of influence on me, and so that was something that I also got influenced. Now, who are my favorite dancers? Too many to name, but let me see who I can start with. So, I'm somebody who I love to watch what the artist brings. So, it's not a particular style that I would say I really like, but in terms of just Bharatanatyam, early years when I was growing up, Yamini Krishnamurthy, who I also trained with, I enjoyed her when I was a student and also as a young dancer. Padma Subramaniyan, I would say, has been a very quiet influence all my life. In fact, if you think of, start again. So Padma Subramanian, in a very quiet way, she's always influenced my dance. And as a young girl in schools, my mother would read all the Tamil magazines, and Padma Akka's photographs would be there. I still remember my table, my wall would be covered with her pictures, and other dancers, but she is somebody I really remember a lot. And I think what Padu Akka has done is quite extraordinary. And in today's dance, Bharatanatyam dance world, her work on Karanas is really influencing lot of dance artists around the globe to use that aesthetics in choreography. Now, in terms of just dancers that I have enjoyed, it's Yamini Krishnamurthy, Padma Subramaniam, of course my own teacher Leela Sampson. I really admire her work. C.V. Chandrasekhar sir, his daughters, then other artists that everyone kind of also love, Rama Vaidyanathan, Priyadarshini Govind, and then Janaki Rangarajan, Rukmini Vijay Kumar, who's now very, very popular, and then Vijna and Ranjit, who I named. They are really beautiful artists. And the other person who has really inspired me and I really have huge admiration for is Shankar Kandaswamy. He's a dance artist who lives and works in Malaysia, and an artist who I feel somehow really, in some ways I feel has defined how we are working today in a way that I think a lot of dance artists have been inspired by his choreography, his work, and of course Maven Khoo, who lives and works in the UK, and UK dance artists. I mean, I really enjoy watching all the Bharatanatyam artists who live in the UK, and there's a young dancer, Divya Ravi, who's just come. She's getting, known very well here. Yeah.
Maybe now it's the time to talk about your dance.
Yeah.
How would you describe
my work?
Your what is the specialty? So it's there's also a discussion about contemporary dance, traditional dance.
Yeah.
Where you put yourself?
Where do I put myself in dance? Well, how do I see my role in dance or my position in dance? I think that's for people to decide. What I'd like to start by saying or reminding, in a way myself, but really to share with everyone, is I really feel very privileged and very grateful to be a dancer, and also very grateful to be here in the UK. I feel that, what I have shared about my inspiration in Kalakshetra, I think that's, in some ways I feel I'm very true to my training at Kalakshetra, in the sense that I trained as a dance therapist. Let me restart that. Okay. So my role in dance or my place in dance. I think that's for others to decide what it might be. I feel very privileged, and I feel it's my life is very blessed because I'm a dance artist. And I think I've stayed very true to my influence of my mother, and of course my father, and Kalakshetra. I have used, or rather dance has used me to live a very fulfilled life, live a life where I'm still discovering the magic of dance. I'm still really surprised sometimes on a day-to-day basis how extraordinary dance is, and how important dance is. You know, if you are like me and you love dance and you read dance books, if you have read some of the dance books, they might, or history of dance, it would say man's instinct of, you know, connecting to itself, and, you know, they would be these big words. And in some ways it's not true at all. In some ways it's not at all untrue. It is very true that I think I feel that our greatest kind of need is to feel, is to experience, and dance does that really brilliantly. I came to the UK in 1994. It's been so long. Yeah, 1994. I came here to train as a dance therapist. I had already, because of my mother's work, taking dance, using it in educational settings, taking it to people with special needs or differently abled, already had set me in this path of really wanting to become a tool of using dance in whichever way it could to enable others. But I soon realized that as I'm enabling others, I'm actually enabling myself. And also transforming myself. And at the time when I was thinking of using dance in these many different contexts, I met my really wonderful husband and partner, Vipul Sangui, who is a communication designer. He trained in NID. He's a photographer, filmmaker, among many things in terms of his creative practice. So he really influenced me into pursuing, as it were, this route of finding how dance can enable possibilities in different people. And my work with within the disability sector, or within the disability area. And the idea was, at that time, I really wanted to understand and have skills of knowing how to use dance in this context. And again, serendipitously, I met people from British Council who saw the work I was already doing in Delhi and asked me to apply for a drama therapy course in UK. And I thought, no, I want to just look at dance. So I came, I trained at the University of Hertfordshire. I immediately met people who were very keen and very interested in this, in me as an artist. And I think, you know, this is 27 years ago, where there were not those many dancers who were looking at dance in this way. And I say dances, I don't even say South Asian dances. I say dances as a much larger group. And of course, as a South Asian or an Indian dancer, you know, I don't think so. They were even considering that dance could be used in these many contexts. And I was just very lucky. I met lots of wonderful organizations, people who really valued what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and offered me work. So Academy offered me a lot of work. They offered me a work permit to work here. I worked at the Birmingham's Children's Hospital. And as I was doing this, I realized that what I really love doing is creating work with non-dancers, taking dance to places where it's not seen. So as a facilitator, I loved that. As a dance maker, I loved that. So we've created dance and placed it, performed it in hospitals. We've performed it at the underground station, in museums, in libraries, as a performer, but also as facilitators, as a facilitator. And that's really very exciting to see how dance can really just connect. And it's also part of my practice. I usually say to people, or in my applications, I love dance and I love people. And it's about, it's really about finding my humanity in what I do. And there are some really, I'll share some some very simple, some stories which are in some ways not dance-based, but to me it really connects to who I am and why I make work. So here, we used to live in Haringey, and I would travel doing dance classes, and I think that particular day I had done a workshop. I was wearing a kurta. I had come to this Haringey bus stop, going somewhere. I still remember, and there were about 3 or 4 women, Somali women, wearing their beautiful dress, some of them in their hijab, in their niqab, or their abaya, and they looked at me and they said, "You Indian?" I said, "Yes." "Oh, dancers, dancers." So we started talking about it, and they started singing and moving as we were standing on the bus stop. And I still remember this particular song. They go, "Aja, aja, 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 main hu." And it was like, wow, this song and dance that connects us across humanity. And they went their ways, I went my way. And those are the kind of stories I find in my life that just reminds me that dance, music actually doesn't have a barrier. You can connect. And so I find ways and projects that allows me to explore ideas about how dance can transform lives while transforming mine. Because when you do the process, you're having a dialogue with people, and through that something new emerges. Recently we made a piece called Chug Chug, and Chug Chug is an Indian dance piece. It's an Indian dance theatre piece about train journey through India. And it's for babies and toddlers. So anybody who's 0 and 5, it's made for them. I made it with four artists. Vipul, my partner, he was one of my main collaborators, and other dance artists, Dom, Saloni, Pratap, and it was so exciting because we actually went to nurseries to explore this idea of what a train journey means, and then came back into the studio to rework those ideas into the piece. And we've already toured it, and we've had such success. And so for me, and if you were to see that piece, you might not find Bharatanatyam very much in the way as a form. And I feel having been a dance practitioner for nearly now 40 years, what has become more important for me is dance and how that dance can connect, not so much the technique of my dance. So that's a piece of work. I made a piece called Karuna, which was a piece that was funded. I have to get the names correct. Okay, so I made a piece called Karuna, which was looking at compassion through exploring the idea of pain and compassion with people with chronic pain. And this was a collaboration with a researcher, and the main researcher, Deborah Padderfield, who has done pioneering work with scientists. So that was the piece of dance I created with her, based on her research. So my work as a dance artist really is connecting to what's happening in the world today. I'm based in Croydon, and with Vipul, we create a lot of projects here. I run dance classes in Croydon, and the dance classes are for people who are very old or elderly. I have classes for children. I also recently have been training in Bollywood and folk styles, so that I can create work, and the way I create work is actually having a dialogue. For me, it's about having conversations with my own artistry and the communities I live with. We also produce festivals. So Dance Festival Croydon is something that we produce. We are also part of Croydon Mela. So I feel what today my practice is as a dance artist, it's creating, choreographing, performing, but also producing events that I feel continues to create a dialogue between who I am and where we are today in the world.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, if you could tell us about the as a professional dancer and a professional career in India and the UK, the difference.
Comparing it.
Yeah, the difference, yeah.
Oh, it's difficult.
Just make a break if you want.
No, it's good. My professional career in India, I wouldn't say I can't say too much about it, because I was very much I not just cocooned, but supported by my teacher's work. So, you know, I was a performing artist there. So, you know, mainly performance is what I did. But I was also doing a lot of facilitation with special needs schools. And at that time, there was not so much an interest in the work I was visioning. Yeah, let me start again. Okay. How do I say? So my training and work in India before I came to the UK, in some ways I was just I had started working there as a professional, and the immediate idea when you finish Kalakshetra, I've trained with Leelaka, was performing. So, you know, everybody is on this route, on this path of being a performing artist. And I was doing that very much. I loved being a performer, and really was trying to understand what it meant being a performing artist in India. But because of my connection to my mother's work, I was also already facilitating dance in special needs schools, and trying to find ways of choreographing work in these different contexts. And I would say that my work within the special needs area was not something that people took seriously, or I would say, at least in my, when I think about it now, and I was a little bit cagey about it, not cagey in a, but I didn't speak too much about it, because I always got the feeling that people were not interested. You know, I used to get these, people would say to me, "Oh, you're so beautiful, you're such a beautiful dancer. Why do you want to do special needs work? Or why do you want to create work on non-dancers?" You know, it was like, you know, it didn't mean, or do outreach work, or, you know, why are you going and doing workshops in schools? So, and in some ways, you know, I sometimes tell people, I love Pooh Bear. I'm not sure if anybody else loves Pooh Bear, but I love Pooh Bear. And I think I'm a bit like Pooh Bear. So Pooh Bear always says he's a bear with no brains. And I think I'm a bit like that. I'm, you know, I don't think that much. I follow my heart. So when people ask this question, I couldn't never answer them, but I knew what I did was right. It's just what I wanted to do. And I just followed my heart, and I met Vipul, who was, you know, really excited, and said, no, you must follow the stream of making work and thinking about dance. And soon I came to the UK, and you know, as I said, Kalakshetra was a big transformation for me, and I think coming to the UK also was. It was really big. It just allowed me to just experiment a lot, explore a lot, you know, collaborate a lot. I've met so many. I've collaborated with English Touring Opera, Timmy Eland, who was the then creative director for community engagement. Did a lot of work with him. Another very wonderful organization. I don't know if it's still around. I think it used to be called Music and Dance for Children or Children's Workshop. So I created all performance work in these different contexts. And, November, here we are in 2021. Now, this is the world we live in. This, from ballet to contemporary dance world is, artists are making work in outdoor work. They are making work for children and toddlers and creating work using the voices of people with different mental health or various challenges. So I feel we live in a very exciting world of creative world where personal voices of different kind, whether you're from the queer community or you are very invested in exploring a certain idea with whether it's about environment, and of course environment has now become big and
Okay, what is your connection with Kalakshetra, and if you could tell us more about Kalakshetra?
So in this journey of being surrounded by arts and by dance, by music, I always took a very active part in school. And doing so, either dancing or being part of theatre or elocution, as we used to call in those days. I don't know if it's still called that. I remember I had created some kind of choreography on other friends when I was in class 9, I think, 12 or 13 years old. And Amma had come to see this performance. And she saw the performance, she saw me dance, and she told me that she really saw something special in me as a dancer, as a mover. She said, until now, I hadn't quite registered, but I really feel you would really benefit a lot to doing this journey. And then she was the one who suggested that when she was a young girl, of course, in those days, given the constraints of communities and society, her parents didn't encourage her, rather her father, because her mother passed away when she was very young. Her father, and more than her father actually, the larger community didn't want her to dance so much. They were very happy with her to do music, but she really wanted to dance. So she said, why don't you go to Kalakshetra? So we applied to Kalakshetra when, at that time. I got selected to go into the school. But my father said, no, I want my daughter to be with me for another 2 years. As soon as I finished class 12, we reapplied and I went to Kalakshetra. So the restrictions, in the time when my mother was growing up, I guess was colored so much by the community and society at that time, which was also colored by colonization and I guess what it really meant was young girls and women learn the art form for the sake of the art form, but not necessarily taking it as a profession. Much more for dance than for music, really, because music was considered available in so many different contexts, whereas dance was a bit difficult. And having said that, because my amma trained with M.L. M.L. Vasantakumari. So MLV was a kind of a star, and she was very keen for Amma to tour with her. but her extended family said no to her. And you can understand, because in those days it was not a nuclear family, it was the extended family that took decisions for you. And I also think because Amma didn't have a mother, she passed away when she was 3.5, 4. So I think there was also the sense of the family to think, we have to really look after this young girl so that she gets married in the right way, and but having said that, she never stopped dancing or singing, and to this day she continues to sing very beautifully. So, yeah. So when we talk about restrictions in a particular time, and we really need to think about the context of those times. It is quite complex. So my foray into formal dance training was thanks to my mother, who said, you must train as a dancer. I think you will be most happy in that. And so I finished class 12 and got admission into the college of Kalakshetra as a full-time training. And Kalakshetra absolutely transformed my life in every way. It was the best decision taken, because when I entered Kalakshetra, and Kalakshetra as it's called, Kalakshetra College of Fine Arts, what it did was, it just did not give me formal training in dance. It really opened my, I say mine, but really my heart to what arts can genuinely do for myself as a person, but also for the society. And therefore it is a personal, but also it allowed me to understand why is dance or the arts so important for India. Because it's not about entertainment alone. So art is, or dance, I will talk about dance, and it is interchangeable. So the idea of a dancer or a movement practitioner was very much embedded in Indian society to transform individuals and the community. And of course, often it can get colored in today's world by, the idea of religion and all of that. But the function of art in Indian society was very much about what we today call community cohesion, mental health and well-being, fitness. Very much it was, I think, I would say the Indian or the Indic society was a very evolved one. And that's something that I'm able to articulate it today. But when I went to Kalakshetra, I think it was just very apparent. The founder, Rukmini Devi, always told us that you're here to become a sensitive human being. Whether you became a professional artist, or you took it as a profession in one way or the other, was not a priority for the college. And I think the other thing also that happened at Kalakshetra, and this also kind of links to Kerala quite importantly, that when Rukmini Devi started her college, or I don't think so, she thought of it as a college or an institution, but it was very much a space for the arts. Some of the earlier practitioners who came to Kalakshetra, both as a teacher and as pupils, were from Kerala. So the Kathakali Asans were brought in, and when Atte, we call her Atte or aunt, when she started creating her dance dramas, the Kathakali art form really, I think, informed how she saw the dance theatre to be created. And a lot of the earlier artists who she created these dance theatre on were Kathakali artists. So Janardhanan sir, Balanna, Kunniraman sir, all these were really had rigorous training in Bharatanatyam, but also equal and perhaps more rigorous training in the Kathakali forms. And you know, when you come into Kalakshetra, you connect with nature, and lots of different arts forms were brought in. So even though we were formally being trained in Bharatanatyam, we had subsidiary training in Kathakali, in various storytelling forms of India, music. So, I mean, I can go on about Kalakshetra, and but it's what transformed me about going to Kalakshetra was this very quiet but also very dynamic lifestyle, from morning yoga to dance to music to being very close to nature is, I think, changed how I have since perceived life and what I do. So when I went to Kalakshetra, I think I was about 16 or just turning 17. So in some ways, young, hungry life. And I went to this college with this, for me, she is still divine. Atte, you know, I can still see her walking down, tall woman, wearing beautiful saris. And she always exuded beauty. And she always told us in different ways to always look for beauty everywhere. And her pursuit for beauty was very much an inner pursuit for humanity. It was done through the arts, but I think that is what really inspired me in Kalakshetra. And this very deep connection between the arts and nature, the arts and how it allows each one of us humans to reach for something higher in ourselves and in the community. I think that's what really connected very deeply to me. And I know that if I didn't turn up into being a professional dancer, it would always have been part of my life in one way or the other. She set up the Kalamkari department. She revived a particular way of weaving. So Kalakshetra has always been about how deeply we can connect to ourselves, our environment, and what's happening there. And it has done through arts, and for me that's through arts. So being a vegetarian or a vegan, wearing, you know, all the things that we are talking about today, you know, how you really look after the planet. Absolutely. We were, and we were never taught in some ways, but it was always there, whether it was in a dance class or a music class, or sometimes just having this beautiful conversations, you know, sitting very close to hearing the beach sound, the water sound. So, you know, when you are surrounded by nature, there's so much learning that happens because it's, in some ways, it's cellular learning. I feel, it's something that almost I feel the universe is asking you to learn. And yeah, I mean, the atmosphere in Kalakshetra is so special. And of course, when I went to college, it was 1983, a very long time ago, and Atte was still around, and all the pioneers who were part of Rukmini Devi's vision were also there. I mean, much, much older. They were kind of, in their 80s, mid 70s and 80s, still dynamic. And so to hear from them as well, their own vision was also very inspiring. They were all theosophists, so I think that's important. And, I guess, I mean, I don't want to go into the definition of theosophy, but this idea that humanity is one was very much central to their vision of the world, and that very much was part of Kalakshetra's vision and training. So, it really has changed. It colors my life every day, even today. The sacred aspect of the arts. I don't, or the religious, and I'm still trying to find definition of what religion is. So I will not use the word religion. I will use the word sacred. I think what sacred means to me, and I feel over time practicing my art and trying to understand the impetus for having arts embedded in the Indic culture. The idea of sacred for me is about being a scientist, and that means to explore who we are as humans, explore our inner nature, and arrive at a sense of harmony with ourselves first, and therefore when I'm able to do that, then I can do it with my fellow beings and the environment and the universe. So I feel, and the reason I called, I said scientist, because in today's world we think that scientists are explorers, but I feel artists have been explorers, yogis are explorers, and I think because, again, if I just simplify the impetus of Indic thought or Indian thought is about exploration. It's about understanding how an individual and therefore a complete community and a society can be fully at harmony. And I think that exploration allowed many processes to happen. So when I mean a process, it's like a toolkit to say you can explore this idea through doing dance. You can explore this idea through walk. You can explore this idea through movement, yoga. You can explore this idea by just sitting down. So I feel that different ways of being in the world were explored, and that is probably why arts became such an important part. Let me try and say this clearer. So the sacredness of the art forms, or the fact that we think and talk about the fact that arts grew very close to religious center, within the religious thought and processes. I am still trying to understand what religion means, so I will use the word sacred or spiritual. I feel a very simple idea within the Indic or the Hindu or the Sanatan form thought is that we are here to find our highest potentials as humans. And in some ways, this can't be becoming stronger in our hands, but in our heart, how can we be stronger? How can we connect with our humanity? And I think because of that, there were a lot of processes that were put. And arts became one of those processes. I think of art or dance as an exploration of who I am, exploration of our humanity. And I think this was also many processes were put, because I think one of the other thing that people understood very well, which we are now talking about, is the idea of plurality and diversity, that all of us experience life very differently. And in the arts, you can do that. There's a freedom of saying, this is how I express myself. This is how you express yourself. We are different, but we are together as humans. So I think because of that, art became a very important part of religious, spiritual expression, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Just before we come to the next, just one step back. Kalakshetras for me is also a kind of reconstitution of South Indian dance. It came originally from the Devadashis in the temples. Of course, this tradition was abandoned in 1900.
Correct.
How do you relate to this tradition?
So this is an interesting question you asked me about Bharatanatyam being a dance form that was practiced by a very particular community. And when Rukmini Devi started her institution, Kalakshetra, the dance form moved from a particular community to the larger community. It's very complex, but what would I like to say about it? Okay, yeah. So I think, let me restart. So dance was practiced by a certain community, and very much today it has moved out. But that's true of every single occupation in India. You look at the arts, whether it's leather work or the sari I'm wearing, or the weaving, they were all part of particular communities. And it is complex because we are looking at, particularly during colonization, there were a lot of restrictions put, and of course a lot of the crafts were also stopped in many ways, and so I think it is in that context, I feel, when India was moving away from a colonial period and re-establishing its own identity. I remember, again, I don't know if I read this as well, but I do remember in Kalakshetra we were told this story that apparently, I mean, I don't know how many of you would know about Annie Besant, but Annie Besant was one of the very famous theosophists who was instrumental in Rukmini Devi being who she became. And her nephew, George Arundel, was married to Rukmini Devi. So I remember this story saying that apparently Gandhi had written to Annie Besant to say, you know, what you're doing is really wonderful, but India right now needs people to work for independence, you know, whether it's to join the non-violent movement of Gandhi. And we were told that Annie Besant and George Arundel and Rukmini Devi, they formulated this answer to say that India can get political freedom, but unless it has cultural freedom and of course socio-economic freedom, it can never be free. And as much as political freedom is important, cultural freedom is equally, if not crucially important. And so the work that they were doing to rebuild India, so Kalakshetra was very much part of that vision. And I guess for myself and a lot of practitioners who trained at Kalakshetra, we at least started understanding our own cultural heritage. Because in the school system, it's not talked about very much, you know, and especially if somebody like me, I was traveling from north to south, east, west. So you would get the culture that you meet, and you would want to go and meet. But within the school system, I mean, from yoga to music to art forms, forget dance, even art forms were not really taught that much. So I think training at Kalakshetra really awakened a sense of what is so rich about this place that, you know, we call India, that is called Bharat. What is so rich about? Why is this place so special? And I think arts really teaches that. It brings a truth that is about the land, which I think is very important. And I think, yeah, I think that is, I don't know, it feels very right to say that, you know, when you are an artist, I feel you touch the soul of the country. And I feel even though I've not been, you know, I was not, I didn't, no, so UK has been my home for the last 27 years. I feel I know this place because I'm an artist, because I connect with different communities. I feel I know its fabric more than somebody who might just live here and go to office. I don't know. Maybe I should not make that statement, but it feels that being an artist, I really feel it's a great privilege to contribute to society through being an artist.
As an artist, you know, what is your connection with the traditional art forms of Kerala or the Kerala state as itself?
Okay. My connection with Kerala, it runs very deep and very long. These are stories I grew up with. So certainly when I was growing up in India, in my mother's family, they would always say, my mother's party, her grandmother is from Palakkad, and they lived in Thiruvananthapuram, and at some point they then migrated to Tiruvayur in the Tanjore district of Tamil Nadu. So it was always, I think, in my unconsciousness, as it were. And certainly when I went to Kalakshetra, it was a big part of our lives in Kalakshetra, because all our tutors, my teachers then, they were from Kerala, and they had all trained in Kathakali and Bharatanatyam. And of course, the dance dramas that are so famous from Kalakshetra were influenced by these Kathakali asanas, by these teachers, in how a character is portrayed. And as we were training in Bharatanatyam, our subsidiary subject was Kathakali. So we were, every week we had a class in Kathakali. And during the art festival season, dance festival season in December, and also sometimes mid-season, we would have dance artists from Kerala come, and we would go and see how they did their makeup. So we would sit around, some of our teachers would talk about that. The people who would have traveled from Kerala, they would talk about how they transform themselves through their makeup, but also we would have these really wonderful conversations about, in those days, not so much conversation. I was only as a student hearing so much, listening, about how they would enter the psychological state of these characters. So as a Bharatanatyam is a solo dance art form, and we would always be told not to exaggerate too much. And yet in the Kathakali art form, they would be taught to maximize their character. And the other difference being one character would only, one person would play one character, whereas Bharatanatyam is a Eka Aharya form. So one character, one dancer will play many characters. So these were the conversations I would hear teachers, have conversations with themselves. In Kathakali you're doing this, and in Bharatanatyam you do this. So what is the influence you take from a dance form? And I was very lucky to be invited to a month-long retreat, it feels month-long, maybe it was 3 weeks, to Alua, which is in Kerala, by Jayachandran, who now runs an amazing dance institution in Bangalore. Artakalari, that's what. So it was and this was 91, 92, I think, maybe 93. So I was there and as a teacher and a performer, but because we were based in Alua and Jayachandran, I don't know if you know him, but he's an extraordinary dance artist who has done pioneering work for contemporary Indian dance, and also how dance form and Keralan art forms needs to be thought about. So again, when I was for those 3 weeks there, I got a Kalari massage every day. We did Kalari every day. we learnt the various art forms of Kerala, so Kudiyattam, the Ottanthul, the Theyyam forms, the puppet forms both of Kathakali and Kudiyattam, the leather puppet form. You know, I've always, I mean, from Kalakshetra days, always, you know, tried to learn more about what art forms there are. And Kerala is always there, prominent. And of course, the Ayurvedic system that we all follow, there's a, you know, great healing system in Kerala through the Marma medicine, you know, it's quite extraordinary. And of course, my teacher Leela Sampson also would, you know, talk about, I mean, many things, but the theatre forms of Kerala would just be discussed often. So my time at Alua, we also went to Venuji's place, Yaranala Kuda, I hope I pronounced that correct now. And that really, wow, 3 days of continuous watching of Kudiyattam was amazing. And to see that time slows down, right? That you have one character, one incident, and you see that in slow motion, because it's fascinating. So those kind of things really, I think what it did was it opened up ideas of how I should be looking at theatre, how I should be looking at my own ways of making work, and dance and theatre as a way of creating work, and how they use the voice, how the use of the instruments, how the space is also created. You know, there's a sense of, you can call it a sacred space, but for me that's really creating a space of focus. So when I came to the UK, you know, with all this influence and wanting to make work, and that's why I wanted to make work in hospitals as well, because for me, you know, the more I understood, I would say, I mean, Kerala is quite I feel it's an extraordinary place, and as a community, as a, you know, and again, Kerala, you know, Malayalis, you know, there are very many kinds, but I feel as a culture, it's quite extraordinary, and maybe somebody has done research about them, but I find here is a culture, it's quite fascinating how it's so holistic. You have the Kalari system, you have the medicine system, so health, well-being, how dance, arts becomes part of the community organizing itself is quite extraordinary. And for me, it is not about religion, it's really about how the community has really evolved in understanding how these things fit to make a thriving community. And I so wish every person who is from Kerala definitely understands the value and the richness of its culture, its heritage. And today we are saying that, you know, we should dance, we should do some kind of, you know, movement, some kind of oil massage just to keep ourselves healthy. It's there in the culture. So, you know, these things really, I think I'm able to articulate it now, but I think it was just like a conscious, unconscious influence. And I thought, you know, here we have a culture that is really talking about a holistic way of living. And when occasionally, I mean, I never went to hospital, but I used to wonder, wouldn't therefore arts really be, if it was in hospitals, if people saw dance, wouldn't their spirits be lifted and they would become, I mean, something for them. I'm not saying that they'll become well immediately, but that it'll aid, it'll create that atmosphere of wellness. And I think when I'm saying these words, again, in the medical profession, in the health and well-being, our language has changed. We now talk about health and well-being rather than of sickness and illness. And I think that's something that the Kerala culture, I think, really understands very well. I think it is of huge value for all of us to understand about it. So it's really exciting for me to share my connection to this wonderful culture. As a dance artist, my work within special needs or the disability area, I would say is something that I've really loved and enjoyed, and I've learned so much. And there also has been a lot of challenge, and also my work, wanting to create work and creating work for either early years or creating in the community. I still find it as a challenge in the sense that I feel our South Asian community have a very narrow vision of dance, and have certain barriers. And I'm not saying this as a disrespect or saying that they don't understand. It's complex, but I'm hoping that over time the community will embrace how the arts is seen in so many different ways, that it's not particular, and especially South Asian dance, because when the dance and the arts is embedded in a society, it means that it also changes. I think it's so exciting to talk about the culture and of Kerala. And I would really, I mean, one of my great, I don't know, dreams, wishes is to see Kalari Payathu being, taken up seriously. And I know there are a lot of Europeans or I would say non-Kerala people who do Kalari, who've really done great service to Kalari. But it'll be great to see the community take more pride in it and, do with it. I also in the UK, because of my connection to the Chawutti massage, as it were called, in India, I also realized that the system of physical training is very well understood in the Keralan system, because even Kathakali artists would have massage. So they really had, I'm saying had, but it is a continuous as well, have a very clear understanding of how the mind, the body and the spirit work. And I'd like to see that rich knowledge. I hope more people, more of Keralan heritage understand it, and perhaps that can also help and influence how the health systems work, because it's health and well-being is something people are beginning to understand and recognize. And just wish the Keralan community lot of richness, actually, because as a culture it's so rich and it has given us a lot, and I hope the community and the people recognize that it is so, that as a community it's very diverse, it's very entrepreneurial as well. So for them to continue to do well, because the more the Kerala community does well, we will all do well.